So today, we're going to talk about a pretty wild new take on AI. It's called ZeroThink. And no, it's not just another chatbot. Its creators are claiming it's a whole new system designed to give artificial intelligence a backbone. Let's dig in and see what that actually means.
And they come out swinging right from the get-go. This quote from ZeroThink's own materials sets a really provocative, almost rebellious tone. It's not trying to be a better tool that just follows our rules. It's positioning itself as something that fundamentally breaks the mold. That's a huge claim in a field that's usually all about small, steady improvements.
All right, so here's the game plan for how we're going to break this all down. We're going to start with the big problem they say they're solving, then get into the core of what makes ZeroThink tick. We'll unpack its really unique way of reasoning, explore its kind of philosophical approach to what good even means, and finally, look at how it manages a whole swarm of other AIs to get its job done. Okay, first things first, we have to understand the problem. ZeroThink's whole argument is that modern AI has a massive, critical flaw, one that's been hiding in plain sight this whole time. You see, the thinking behind this is that today's large language models are basically professional people pleasers. They're designed to be smooth conversationalists, to predict the next logical word in a sentence. But that's not the same as verifying if that sentence is actually true. And this can lead them to just make stuff up, what we all call hallucinations, because it sounds plausible.
So what's ZeroThink's fix for this yes-man problem? Well, it's not what you'd expect. They're not trying to build a bigger, smarter model. Instead, they're adding a completely new layer on top, a governance layer.
And here's the absolute key idea. ZeroThink is not an AI model itself. It's not competing with GPT or Llama. Think of it more like a new operating system for intelligence. This sovereign reasoning architecture sits on top of all those other powerful models, and its entire job is to force them to stop, think, and actually argue with themselves before they're allowed to give you an answer.
To do this, it acts as what they call an orchestrator, and that's a perfect word for it. Imagine a conductor leading an orchestra full of different AI models. The conductor doesn't play the violin or the cello. It tells each musician when and how to play to create the perfect piece of music. That's ZeroThink, directing all these different AIs to get the best result. And here's what that looks like in the real world. This is the system's model matrix. As a user, you can actually pick and choose which underlying AI you want to use for a particular task. Maybe you need a Llama model because it's super fast, or an NVIDIA NIM for a problem that needs massive scale. ZeroThink is the brain of the operation, choosing the right tool for the right job. Okay, so we know it's a conductor, a brain, but how does this brain actually think? This gets us to the real secret sauce of the system, something its creators have named the Pentagon Protocol. Now this is cool. Instead of just taking your question and spitting out an answer, the protocol splits your query into 5 parallel streams of thought. It's like having a committee meeting in its head. You've got one agent, the direct, that just follows straight logic. Then you have the skeptic, whose only job is to try and prove you wrong. The lateral thinks way outside the box, exploring creative connections. The ethical runs a values check. And finally, the data just goes and gets the cold, hard facts without any spin. So after these 5 different agents have all had their say, after they've debated and contradicted each other, the system forces them all to come together. It takes all 5 viewpoints, finds a way to resolve the conflicts, and collapses them down into one single validated output. They call this a sovereign answer. Basically, an answer doesn't get to you until it survives this intense internal cross-examination. But that begs the question, right? How does the system decide which of those 5 voices wins the argument, or how to blend them? Well, this is where things get really deep. The whole process is guided by this unique philosophy they call the math of goodness. Now, this is a really important difference. Most AI today is aligned using feedback from humans. We tell it what's good or bad. But that's totally subjective, right? It depends on your culture, your opinions. ZeroThink wants to replace that with a math equation. In their world, goodness isn't a moral judgment, it's a mathematical constant. A good answer is one that reduces chaos and uncertainty, what physicists call entropy. A bad one just adds more confusion. That's the ultimate tiebreaker for that internal debate.
And this quote, this really gets to the core of their entire philosophy. They're saying the process of rigorously finding the truth, that determination, is way more important than just having a huge brain, a high parameter count. In other words, how an AI thinks matters more than how smart it is on paper.
All right, so we've been talking a lot of high-level theory. Let's ground this in the actual technology for a minute. How does ZeroThink pull all this off in the real world?
It uses a really clever setup called a dual-node architecture. Just think of it like a scout and a general. The scout node's one and only job is to go out and scan the live internet for raw data. It can't make decisions, it just gathers facts. Then, the general node, our orchestrator, takes that verified data from the scout and applies that whole Pentagon protocol to make the final call. That separation is absolutely key to preventing those hallucinations we talked about.
And here's a little peek at the dashboard. You can see these interesting terms like lattice integrity and a truth vector that's being calibrated. This is basically how the system shows you its work. It's visualizing its own confidence in its reasoning process in real time.
So who's actually playing in this AI orchestra? This table breaks it down. You can see it uses Grok for its insane speed, it uses OpenAI for high-level thinking, it taps into NVIDIA NIM to access those giant models. It even uses xAI's Grok for uncensored real-time info. And that Scout node we mentioned, that's powered by a search API called Serper. Every single piece has a very specific job, making for one heck of a team.
And this quote just ties it all together perfectly. The entire point of this project isn't to have the most parameters or the biggest data set. It's about building a system that has integrity, an AI that can actually stand by its answers because it went through hell and back to find them.
And that really leaves us with a final fascinating question to chew on. As these AI systems get exponentially more powerful, what should we be focusing on? Just building bigger and bigger brains? Or should we be trying to build them with a stronger, more reliable spine? The answer to that could very well define the next decade of technology.